Now, I know what you're thinking. The term Golden Generation is thrown around so much that it's lost all meaning. The definition of a Golden Generation being, quote, in a sport, Golden Generation or a Golden Team is an exceptionally gifted group of players of similar age, whose achievements reach or are expected to reach a level of success beyond which their team had previously achieved. We've heard the likes of Golden Generations for Belgium in the late 2010s, England as recently as the last few tournaments, and of course Portugal in 2004 and 2020/2021. So why now? What makes this Portuguese generation better than 2004? The likes of Ricardo Carvalho, Deco, Rui Costa, Figo, and of course a young CR7. Or better than 2020? Pepe, Rúben Dias, Cancelo, Bruno Fernandes, Bernardo Silva, João Felix, and of course an older CR7. Well, this is what this video is for. With the World Cup on the horizon and only under a year away, I make the case for Portugal. Why I think this could be a squad that could win the World Cup and what could stop them. But I'm not just talking about international level, because Portugal at the moment are excelling on all fronts of football. First of all, it would be a miss if I didn't talk about Diogo Jota and his brother Andre Silva. Their tragic passing didn't just shock Portugal, but shocked the world. Diogo, who was a mainstay of Liverpool and the national team, and Andre Silva, who battled in Portuguese second division. 2 lives lost way too soon. My thoughts go out to all the friends and family of those affected. But in football terms, a lot can happen over a year. In 2025, we saw Portuguese talent conquer the big stages. João Neves, Vitinha, Nuno Mendes, Gonçalo Ramos not only won the French League, but the Champions League. What's even more incredible, Nuno Mendes is only 23, João Neves is 20, Vitinha is 25, and Gonçalo Ramos is 24. All of these players will most likely not just make the World Cup this year, but could even make the one after in 2030. And of course, Portugal would win the Nations League, with a fantastic performance, it should be said, from Nuno Mendes. But let's look at the Portuguese national team and go position by position. Goalkeeper of course is Diogo Costa, not only the undisputed number 1 at Porto, but for Portugal as well. And at 25, in my opinion, for the good of his career, should look to make a move away from Porto. Or he could end up in the same territory of someone like Rui Patricio. A fantastic goalkeeper, but someone who made his big moves too late in his late 20s and early 30s. Rui Silva did have a great year at Sporting, but I don't think anyone is going to take away that number 1 shirt from Diogo Costa. Diogo Costa did have an off year with FC Porto, but has been linked to moves away. That's just another reason why I think he should move. And you could argue Diogo Costa's lack of form at Porto this year was due to the defence around him. He was stuck with Thiago Jalou, Noem Perez, Zé Pedro and Otavio. No disrespect to any of those players, but none of those players are national team ability level starters anyway. Of course we already mentioned Nuno Mendes, but on the other side of the pitch is up for question at right back. João Cancelo and Diogo Jota have been out of form for the last few seasons, and Cancelo is currently applying his trade in Saudi Arabia. Nelson Semedo is currently a free agent, and could we see someone come up through the ranks next year? With his move to Juventus and potentially Sporting, does someone like Alberto Costa get a surprise call up? Is Nuno Tavares shifted in that position? Or is it just going to be a case of João Neves being put in that position like he was against Germany or Spain? Centre back has been a questionable position for Portugal over the last few years, but we've finally seen some stability. Rúben Dias is Manchester City's main centre back, but who would his partner be at the back? Gonçalo Inácio maybe? He's been Sporting's centre back for the last 5 years, but is well protected in a back 3, whereas Portugal play in a back 4. And one could argue, like Diogo Costa, should make the move to a more competitive league. Antonio Silva and Thomas Araujo are both highly rated and could do a job, but it remains to be seen if they are at the level required. Totti Gomes has been in and around the squad, but really hasn't impressed at Wolves or Portugal. The same goes for Renato Veiga, who was at Chelsea and now Juve, but is naturally a midfielder. Other players that could be in with a shout over the next year is Eduardo Quaresma, who has continued to impress at Sporting, or someone like Diogo Leite, who has been a regular starter for Union Berlin. Portugal's midfield is completely stacked. Just to name a few: Bruno Fernandes, Bernardo Silva, Rúben Neves, João Neves, Vitinha, João Palhinha, and Rodrigo Moura. Even outsiders like Gedson Fernandes, Gelson Fernandes, Matheus Nunes, Matheus Fernandes, Thomas Andel, Dario Sugo, Daniel Bragança, Renato Veiga, and even as recently, João Simões, who Roberto Martínez said was knocking on the door of the national team. The same could be said for the winger positions. Rafael Leão, Chico Conceição, Francisco Trincão, Pedro Neto, Pedro Gonçalves, Giovanni Kenda, and João Felix. And there even could be more outsiders who they could count on if they continue to have great seasons or good seasons that they did last year. Roger Fernandes, Fabio Silva, Felix Correa, Nuno Moreira, and Ricardo Horta could all be in with a shout if they continue their good form. Now onto the controversial topic, the striker position. There is no denying Cristiano Ronaldo's status as the greatest Portuguese footballer of all time. What he's achieved for a nation as small as Portugal is truly remarkable. From leading the scoring charts at Euro 2016 and producing moments of brilliance that have kept Portugal competing at the highest level. He's carried his country time and time again. But at the same time, it's clear Ronaldo is no longer the player he once was. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Father Time spares no one. But it can become a burden on the team when legacy outweighs form. We've seen moments where Ronaldo insists on taking every free kick, despite failing to hit the target or create real chances. It's a delicate balance between honouring a legend and making the best decisions for the squad. You saw when Fernando Santos benched him at the last World Cup. It was a media storm. Cameras were everywhere and the pressure was all on the squad. And although in that game it paid off with Gonçalo Ramos scoring a hat-trick, you could argue it didn't work the same against Morocco. Now it could be down to the fact that he's playing in a less competitive league in Saudi Arabia, but that also sets a dangerous precedent. If you're not going to call people from Saudi up, then there goes Cancelo, Rúben Neves, and a few more. Or perhaps it's simply Ronaldo's ego won't let him to accept a bench role. Either way, it may be someone else to step up. Is that Gonçalo Ramos, who in fairness hasn't exactly been prolific in front of goal at PSG? But that then raises another question. If not them two, who else is available? Can Beto score consistently enough to earn a regular spot with the national team at Everton? Can Andre Silva regain the form that he once had? Personally, I've been one of the biggest advocates for a striker named Paulinho, who plays in Mexico. He recently won the Mexican League Player of the Year and the Golden Boot. Before that, he had a strong season at Sporting, scoring 15 goals, most of them coming off the bench. Now I know what you're thinking, I'm a biased Sporting fan and Mexico, but ask yourself, is it really that different from the Saudi League? I'll let you be the judge, but in my opinion, I don't think so. And yes, to the first point, I am a biased Sporting fan. Right now, Ronaldo might be the only choice. And last but not least, we've got the manager situation. Roberto Martínez. Honestly, if you ask me, if he hadn't have won the Nations League, I truly believe we were looking at someone like José Mourinho, but as the saying goes, if my mother had wheels, she would be a bike. Roberto Martínez did prove a lot of people wrong by winning the tournament. That said, he also did play João Neves at right back, and let's be honest, that should be a sackable offence on its own. Is the manager who oversaw Belgium's Golden Generation exit with a whimper really the right man to lead Portugal forward? Personally, I don't think so, but it's clear he has one thing: the respect of the players, and also the respect of the federation, and arguably most importantly, of Cristiano Ronaldo. For me, I think we still should have parted ways with him after the Nations League, but that doesn't mean Roberto Martínez can't prove me and a lot of people wrong again. If he can replicate his Nation League success on the World Cup stage, Portugal could very well be in the mix to lift the trophy. Of course, that is a big if, but with the talent this squad has, arguably the most stacked generation in the nation's history, maybe level on par with 2004, anything is possible. Spain, France, England, Brazil, Argentina, and many more will all be gunning for the trophy. But do not count Portugal out, because in my eyes, the real golden generation of the Portuguese national team isn't 2004 or 2020, it is right now. Lately, it's not just players from Portugal making waves, it's the ones on the touchline. We're talking about the kings of the dugouts, the clipboard tacticians, and the new exports of Portuguese football, because this also might be Portugal's golden generation of managers. So why now? Why are Portuguese managers dominating coaching conversations in the Premier League, Ligue 1, La Liga, Saudi Arabia, and even Brazil? What makes them different to the tactical giants of other nations? To ask that, we need to look at the legacy. Before there was Amorim, before there was Conceição, Marco Silva, there was José Mourinho. The special one didn't just win, he reshaped the identity of English football when he first landed at Stamford Bridge and of course at Porto in 2004. He brought structure to Chelsea, arrogance and mind games, but most importantly, he brought silverware. Mourinho has been the blueprint, but it wasn't a one-off. He opened the floodgates. Of course, after him, there were managers like Andre Villas-Boas, who didn't work out with Chelsea, did okay at Tottenham, but sort of went out of a whimper of his manager career. But ever since then, let's look at some of the managers in the Premier League. Nuno Espirito Santo at Nottingham Forest, getting them into European places which no one thought was possible. Marco Silva has Fulham in one of the most stable conditions they've ever been in. You can look at other examples like Rúben Amorim, of course not really doing well at Manchester United, but still getting them to a Europa League final and of course excelling with Sporting. Paulo Fonseca in France and even Abel Ferreira in Brazil winning the Copa Libertadores with Palmeiras. But what makes them special? Why do so many clubs around Europe target Portuguese managers? It's more than just good PR, because Portuguese coaches are deeply educated, tactical, and most of them are above all adaptable. They don't cling to philosophy the same way others do. They're not wedded to high pressing or possession at all costs. Instead, they read the room. They adjust. Some of them win ugly. Some of them just win. It's why you'll see Rúben Amorim use a 3-4-3 at Manchester United with a short vertical build-up, and Marco Silva blend in pressing and possession in equal measure at Fulham. It's tactical pragmatism, modern football's most underrated skill. But let's talk about identity as well. Portugal's coaching education system is elite. The culture is embedded in the managers, and now clubs in Europe are starting to take notice. Another reason why they look at Portuguese managers, you can argue, is because what do most managers have in common? And that is they're represented by one man, João Mendes and Gestafute. You cannot talk about Portuguese managers without talking about the machine behind them. João Mendes didn't just change the agent game, he's built an empire. Gestafute just isn't a talent agency, it's a footballing syndicate. At one point, José Mourinho, Nuno Espirito Santo, Paulo Fonseca and Sergio Conceição, even players like Cristiano Ronaldo and Bernardo Silva were all under one roof. Call it influence, call it networking, but it works. Because with Mendes, doors open, and that's when the managers step through. You look at Wolves as the greatest example of this. Mendes, of course, was involved with Wolves massively, sending Nuno Espirito Santo to guide them from the Championship to the Premier League, but also sending the late great Diogo Jota and Rúben Neves there as well. And he managed to keep Wolves in the Premier League on multiple occasions, until he made the move to Tottenham. From there, Bruno Lage came in, but unfortunately didn't have the same result. Gary O'Neill came in after, but then they went back to the Portuguese manager of Vitor Pereira, who managed to avoid relegation, but also have some great battles in the bottom half of the Premier League, and had Wolves finishing in a respectable position. So where does this leave us right now? Right now, the Premier League, once the playground of English and Scottish managers, has fully embraced the Portuguese wave. And no, we're not saying every one of them is the next Mourinho, but when you look at the tactical growth of the game, you consider how vital adaptability, game management and tactical depth have become. It's no surprise really that Portugal is producing more talent on the pitch, it's also exporting brains from the bench. You even look at Liga Portugal right now. Let's look at some of the managers there. Rui Borges, of course my manager at Sporting, has won the Cup double, and led Sporting to back-to-back titles the first time in 70 years. Of course you can argue Amorim did a lot of the heavy lifting and the squad building, but Rui Borges also did very well with Vitória Guimarães, getting them second in the Conference League table. You look at someone like Vasco Matos, who's done very well with Santa Clara, even getting them Europe last season. You look at João Pereira, who's done a fantastic job at Casa Pia as well. You've also got former Portuguese midfielder Custódio, who just got Alverca promoted from the second division, and the list goes on. You can look at Hugo Oliveira from Selecao, Vasco Sebra at Aroca, and many more. So, is this the golden generation? Not just for players like João Neves, Rafael Leão, Vitinha, etc., but for the men shaping those who play. For me, the real legacy of Portuguese football might not just be found on the pitch, but it might be on the touchline, clipboard in hand, barking instructions in 3 different languages and outthinking the opposition. The real golden generation might be wearing suits. But if you ask me, Portugal's footballing generation right now, from footballers to managers, is the best it's ever been. They are on the verge of something really special, whether that results in a World Cup or not. I still think Portugal will have a major say in what's to come over the next 10 or 20 years of football. So let me know what you guys think. Are Portugal in a golden generation, or am I just exaggerating? Are there teams ahead of Portugal in terms of footballing and managerial ability? Maybe, but I think the way Portugal is setting up for the future has been fantastic. But if you ask me, I am biased as well. Of course, coming from a Portuguese family, of course I'm going to support Portugal, but whatever it is. What do you guys think? Am I right? Am I wrong? Am I somewhere in the middle? Please let me know in the comments below. I'm in San Francisco. Thank you very much for watching. I will see you next time, and peace.